Hello, I'm Michael Depp, and welcome to Talking TV, the podcast that brings you smart conversations about the business of broadcast. This week, I'm with Mike Garber, Director of Content for the National Desk, Sinclair's national news product. The National Desk premiered last January as a 3-hour weekday morning newscast on Sinclair's 68 stations, plus its streaming Stir network. It stitches together contributions from across the group's stations, added a 2-hour evening broadcast in September, and then early December saw the launch of the nationaldesk.com, which is a continuously updated news site. Mike Garber, my guest this week, is in charge of content at all of these news products for the National Desk at Sinclair. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, Mike, the National Desk is of a piece with other national news initiatives that are underway at some of the larger station groups. Nexstar has News Nation, EW Scripps has Newsy, regionally it has a Florida 24/7 station. Why is it a prerogative for Sinclair to make a national play like this? What's the longer term significance? Is it about further weaning off the networks as they're focusing a lot of their own programming energy on their streaming efforts?
I think there's a couple layers to it. I think if you were to look at the base layer, the 68 non-news producing stations that we're on, we're there to make them more relevant and more profitable. We want to make sure that, there was this talk a few years ago about state attrition within the stations, and we want to make sure that these stations have news so that they can be more successful. So that's a layer. And obviously a second layer would be to help some of our other stations as time periods come open up, and how can we insert news into them. But from the national footprint, obviously they want to make sure that they have a voice out there and the reach that we are getting to across the country.
So in just over a year, you've had to scale up to about 5 hours of weekday news, plus the website, which I mentioned just launched last month and is continuously updated. How big of a team do you have putting this all together?
We're about 55 people in total. And to be clear, it's 5 hours in the morning that goes across all the time zones. Okay. So we're in the morning from 6 to 11 a.m. and then in the evening, there's 2 hours that airs simultaneously across all the time zones. Mm-hmm. So, the team is focused and understands the mission, and it obviously is not as large as some of the other groups that you've talked about, but certainly we're doing well.
So where's your central location? Where's the hub here?
We're in DC. And
are you largely working remotely right now because of the pandemic?
We have some people remote because of the uptick, but there's still people here. We may want to make sure we've got a space where people can be far apart, but we are a little bit of hybrid on a lot of different levels right now. We can do almost every job from remote, as most stations can.
Right. And of course, having just launched just about a year ago, this is a project that was born during the pandemic. So you had to put this team together remotely and organize it.
It was. In fact, it wasn't until really a second or third round of hires before we actually brought people in. And so many people were hired remotely. But, I think there's a certain art to that. And when I look at the team that we have, and specifically the culture that we're building, I think that we've done a really nice job.
Has it been tough to sort of build an esprit de corps and coalesce a team in that kind of climate?
No, because I think that there's a general excitement about what we're doing. So a lot of the people obviously have come from local newsrooms, and I don't want to say tired of doing it, but had been doing that for a while. And it's nice every now and then to get reinvigorated. And so I think when you talk to the people who have been in newsrooms and say, okay, this is what we're looking at, this is the project that we're going and the reach that we potentially have, there's an excitement there that says, okay, let's go for it.
Mm-hmm. So how much of the content is produced exclusively by the National Desk team as opposed to coming from the stations? Do you have a rough percentage breakdown?
Not necessarily a percentage breakdown. We are a news broadcast. So, we do rely on the stations, but we don't run 10 packages from the local stations a day in each show. So we have ways of getting video, as everyone else does, to report the news. We have reporters for both the morning and the evening, national reporters, who will probably I'd say probably 60-40 go from enterprise to using some station content to create a national story. And then when you look at the stations, it really is a daily call whether we use one reporter from a station or two reporters from a station or 2 or 3 packages from a station. It just depends.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested in that process of how it works in terms of identifying content at the station level and then lifting it up for the national broadcast. I mean, do you take those pieces whole cloth, or is there some versioning done for your broadcasts?
It really is day by day. There are the conversations that we largely have. So, okay, does that topic that we look at that station have some sort of national appeal, or how do we write it to make it sure that it has national appeal? This is conversations that every local station has, right? Why do I care? And we have the same conversation here. So if we're taking a story out of Columbus or out of West Palm Beach or out of Salt Lake City or Seattle, one of the things that we first look at is, okay, what kind of interest does that have? And then if we decide that it does have interest, or we're right to the point where it does have interest, then we have the option to run that package in full. Generally, we'll run one package per half hour in full from the stations. We have another franchise within us that airs segments of packages just to kind of give you a flavor of what's going on around the country, where that might be like 3/4 of a package or a package broken down into a shorter version, but it's packaged all together to give you a sense of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So are you talking with the news directors every day at individual stations, and when they're having their morning meetings, do you have a window into that to see the inception of a story, or are you looking more at the finished products?
Both ends of that. Largely it's the finished product. Most of my dealings with the news directors at the local level are if we're trying to do a national story and want to aggregate some content. If there's something that's going on across the country, let's just say, COVID in schools, and we decided to do a national story, I can get content for our national reporters from the stations and get them to contribute. But largely we'll look at their stories as they upload them and say, okay, that could meet some of the criteria we're looking for.
So it's not an easy thing to make people in one market care about local news from a faraway other market. And it seems that you've got to do that every day. So are Sinclair's local stations at all rethinking their own selection and presentation of their stories now, with a view to the fact that many of them will make it over to the national desk? So they, in a way, need to frame them up to be more relevant to a broader viewership?
No, they focus on their local audiences, and we'll look at the stories and say, okay, does that topic have national appeal? It just doesn't make sense for us to dictate to them. The only time that does come into play is where when there's a big story going on and we would like to get a live shot from them. That way we can talk to the reporter, the news director, and say, this is the direction we'd like to go on this because of the content.
So you will go live to local reporters at Sinclair stations?
Yeah. And it depends on, there are a number of layers we look at. If there's actual breaking news going on, when there was the snow in Seattle that was causing havoc, we went out there. When there's been a big story in a couple of other stations, we've gone live to there. We'll take live pictures from them as well, with using live view that allows us to look into stuff. But it's not set in stone. We have to do that every single day. We make the content choices on a daily basis to say, this is what makes sense, or this doesn't make sense.
Okay. And now that you have the nationaldesk.com site up, I imagine you're pulling even more from the stations locally?
I don't know that we're pulling more. We just now have a place to put it. Mm-hmm. We like the nationaldesk.com because we think it's as distinctive as our product is. It's got a very bold front-facing video player that has all of our shows on it, and then we can insert videos into that player that we think also are impactful or an interesting story.
And that video player, which is quite large, it's what confronts you when you first open up the page. Is that running the linear live? Is that sort of the default?
Yes,
behavior?
it is. But it also has, one of the goals of that was to have live elements throughout the day. So while the newscasts are always there and playing while they're on, there's also press conferences going on around the country or here in DC all the time. So we program that and hope to program that more. One of the conversations we're having is that we have easy access to whatever goes on here in DC, but we need to think more about, okay, what's going on? If there's a big story in another part of the country, can we get that on there as well?
Well, I know that was a facet of Stir, that there was a COVID channel, for instance, that opened up inside of the Stir universe that was playing basically a continuous run of COVID-related press conferences from around the country, as I recall. And I presume that's still running now inside of the. So Sinclair had a pretty rough foray into political commentary that ended back in December 2019. So it's a while back. Notably, there was a lot of station pushback over having to run pieces by Boris Epstein that expressed a decidedly right-wing point of view. What did the company learn from that experience, and how has that carried over to the national desk?
I would say that, frankly, that there's not much equation to the national desk. If you were to ask me as a news director at that time, I felt that the company learned that they listened to us, and they added a second voice when they did, and ultimately that commentary on both sides went away. But there's not commentary on the national desk at all. In fact, we try to get as far away from opinion as possible and just bring good, hard news to it.
So that whole left-right kind of dichotomy that's not in the cards for the national desk to present that kind of, well, here's one side.
No, we look at facts, and that's truly, we're not here to be CNN. We're not here to be Fox. We're here to be a national newscast that brings facts forward.
So what is next for the trajectory now of the national desk?
Well, the great thing is right now we're still in this crawling phase. So it's a daily work on content to refine what we look like. We've had a lot of growth without a whole lot of promotion. And so, in fact, right now we're in the middle of some promotion in 4 key markets. The layer right now that we are in is just making sure that our content stands up, which we believe that it does, and is able to drive an audience.
Okay, great. Well, very interesting to see how this comes together. Mike Garber from Sinclair's The National Desk. Thanks so much for being here today. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Cheers. A new episode of Talking TV is available most Fridays on TVNewsCheck.com. You can also listen and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify.